Mad Mamluks. My name is Mohammed.
My name is Amir.
My name is Sim.
Today we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Fahad Khan. Dr. Fahad Khan is a psychologist with a doctorate in clinical psychology and a master's degree in biomedical sciences. He's also a Hafiz of the Qur'an and has studied Islamic studies with various scholars in the Muslim world and the U.S. He is currently a student at Darul Qasim, continuing his Arabic and Islamic studies. He also serves on the Editorial Board for Muslim World Affair, an online peer-reviewed journal. He has conducted research studies on help-seeking attitudes of Muslim Americans as well as the effects of acculturation and religiosity on psychological distress. The primary focus of his clinical training has been with children and adolescents suffering from serious mental illness. However, he has a broad range of experiences dealing with individuals from all age groups and cultural backgrounds. Dr. Fahad, welcome.
Good to have you here, brother.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you here. I want to start with why psychology? What got you there?
Actually, so none of it was planned, right? When I look back now of where I began and how I ended up here, it just kind of like worked itself out. So, I was pre-med, just like every other day. See, I'm sure half of you guys were pre-meds here. But for some reason, I don't know why, I chose psychology as my major. And I still don't, I was thinking about it just a few days ago, like, why did I pick my psychology as a major? I could have chosen sociology. I could have chosen computer science because I liked, even then, could have stayed with pre-med. But I chose psychology, and then when I graduated, I didn't get into medical school because I'm pretty sure I wasn't cut out to be a doctor or at least a physician. So then the only job I could get as a psychology major was as a counselor at hospital. And so that's where I kind of started getting my initial exposure to like working with patients, severe mental illnesses. And then from there, then my interest started developing still as a pre-med. And 2 years after that, then I decided to go get my PhD, my doctorate.
And so that's when you decided you wanted to be a full-fledged psychologist.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's awesome. So what's your day-to-day? Are you meeting with people? What kind of work do you do?
So full-time, I'm the deputy director at Khalil Center. This is a psychological treatment center. We have 3 offices in Illinois, 1 in California. So we do some prevention work, like workshops, seminars, etc. Intervention, which is like direct therapy, so individual therapy, family therapy, couples counseling. And then we do some Islamic spiritual wellness as well. So we do halaqat and support groups, etc. So that's my core of what I do on day-to-day. I also teach. So I teach at College of DuPage undergraduate courses and then Concordia University of Chicago in their graduate program. I'm
interested in what you said about the Islamic, the halaqat. What is that?
So actually, so at Khalil Center, we have Human, who's the executive director, and I'm the deputy director. Human handles most of that component because he's more, well-versed in religion. He's been a student throughout his life. So there's Salat al-Salam, there's like once a month they have, on a Thursday. They also have halakat related to like studying. So on every Sunday, for example, we do a didactic, and part of that is we study something religious. So from Ghazali, recently we've been studying a book called Al-Fatan wal-Balaya wal-Mihan I can't remember the Arabic title, but it's the trials, the benefits associated with trials and tribulations. And so that's kind of like the for us to become more self-aware and then to be able to implement that into therapy for our clients.
Oh.
Is it Izzuddin Abdul Salam's work?
Yeah, Izz
Awesome.
Abdul
Yeah.
Wait, what is that, if you don't mind explaining for me or people who don't know?
So it's so basically Izz ibn Abdul Salam, I don't know when it was written, but like a long time ago, he came up with benefits of trial. So when we have a trial tribulation and we have a problem, like somebody gets fired, somebody has a divorce, somebody gets in an accident, we always think of the negative aspects of it. So what he did was he highlighted the positive aspects. So starting with like number 1 was recognizing, I think it said, ma'rifatu izz al-rububiyyati wa qahriha. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Lord and His Majesty. And then ma'rifatu dhill al-ubudiyyati wa kasriha. Like that's number 2, that recognizing yourself as the servant and the aspect, the neediness or the the lowliness that comes with being the servant. And he goes on and talking about how ikhlas for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and other benefits associated with trials and tribulations to make it better for the person, so the person doesn't feel like it's all negative.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. A lot of young people have a great deal of difficulty dealing with trials and tribulations that are happening in their life, and a lot of times it's usually causing them to a lot of doubt in their belief. Through your study, so what have you come away with it?
I mean, I can give you my own personal example because the reality is when we get people in my office, they usually are either going through the trial, right, or they've gone through and they're still suffering from it.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have one client now who, he broke up with his girlfriend and he wanted to marry her, but it's been almost a year now and he's difficult for him to get over it.
Yeah.
So by the time he gets better, he probably won't be coming to me.
Right.
So I usually don't see people when they're better already. They're by that time they're out of my office, out of my life. Alhamdulillah, I'm happy for them. But I can tell you from my own personal example, though, whenever someone is going through a difficult time, it's very difficult. The way our mind works and recurring thoughts and the whole CBT model, and we can talk about it too. But the way it works is that you constantly bring yourself down. You don't think about anything good that comes out of it. But when we look back, like if I look back at the times that I've had difficulties in my life, I mean, alhamdulillah, man, I'm here today because of those times. And I learned so much from those times and everything turned out to be okay.
Isn't that exactly it? That our experiences make us who we are now. So many difficult situations that we've dealt with in our life that we couldn't imagine handling. Current life and our surroundings, our work, we couldn't have handled it if we didn't experience what we had in the past.
Is there a way to train yourself for that, to see the good in things? Like for example, you get into a car accident, and where is the good in that? How are you supposed to see the good in that?
I mean, it's difficult, but so there's ways you can do that, right? For example, there is a 9th century scholar, and his name is Al-Balkhi. I think Abu Zayd Al-Balkhi.
We were just talking about that before you came here.
Really?
Yes.
So he in his book, he talks about this one thing, which I practice it with my clients. So after they've gotten better, or these clients are maybe not suffering with something like that, is to take happy thoughts and happy memories and store them. Right? So you're a positive person. So if you're constantly aware of the goodness around you, if you're constantly aware of all the blessings that you have, when something like a car accident happens, you're like, okay, it happened, alhamdulillah, but you know what? I got all these things here. But most of the time we don't notice the positives because, we're enjoying it. I got a bowl full of chips here where people are, every 3 seconds somebody dies in the world, right? But I can just pick up a chip and just, survive, alhamdulillah. I'm not noticing it because it's something positive. But when something negative happens, say I was hungry right now and you had chips and you wouldn't give them to me, I would notice that, right? I'd feel bad about it. So if we start noticing the positives on a regular basis and keep storing these positive memories, positive thoughts, eventually I think you can. Still though, you will still feel some negativity, but at least you'll be able to get out of it quicker.
One of the I was listening to a podcast not too long ago by Tim Ferriss, and he has this thing where at the end of every day or whenever you wake up, you write all the good things that happen. Are you familiar with this? So you write down all the things you're pretty much grateful for, which you're happy about, and it's supposed to have some kind of positive impact on you, on your psychology. To be honest, I've been too lazy to ever try it. But yeah, I was just wondering if you were ever familiar with that. I don't know. I feel like
would that be helpful, you think?
Absolutely. I mean, being aware of the blessings that you have. And not only that, I usually go a step further, not for myself. I mean, sometimes I do that with myself too, but especially with my clients who have chronic depression. So we sit there and identify like positive memories. So for example, I have one client now who has negative recurring thoughts. And so like, I asked him, he's actually a young boy. He's 9 or 8 years old. And I asked him like, what did you do last week? And, he said he went to his cousin's house. And so, okay, so what was the day like? You remember what you had for breakfast? What were you wearing? What was the temperature like? What did you guys eat for lunch? What did you do then? How did you enjoy it? How much, did you like it? So what you're doing is you're taking that memory that was fresh in mind and consolidating it and storing it as like a positive memory, right? So a lot of the things that we remember are negative. And so what we're doing is remembering the positives. So that's a practice. What you're saying, making a list or identifying. I've done that with a couple of my clients as well, who have a lot of self-esteem issues, like I'm not a good mother, my life sucks. Then you identify the things that you're good at. Like I'm a good cook, for example, or I'm a good teacher. All those things, and then you identify, remind yourself of those. Yeah, and it helps.
About the guy you were saying who broke up with his girlfriend, a Muslim kid, right? How do you play that? I'm sure there's, first off, you're a doctor, right? But then you're also, you practice the deen. What do you do about
balance between the professionalism and the religion portion?
Exactly. You can't just be like, oh, it's haram. You shouldn't have had her in the first place. So, how do you navigate that?
I mean, so I look at it from different perspectives, right? I'll give you another example, which is kind of similar. I once had a female client contact me. She's like, I want to come to Khalil Center. And we try to separate the male and female. So the males are given to male counselors and vice versa. But, she said, no, I want to see. Okay. So she comes in, she said she was Muslim on the phone. Comes in and she's wearing shorts, and she's sitting there. And like, I had a reaction to it. I'm like, okay, like I should tell her something. But then I realized that she knew where she was coming. She knows that this is the Khalil Center. There's Muslims working here. Human has a huge beard. I got one, it's kind of small. We have a dress code. Women are wearing hijab. Men have to have their shirt out. Like it's pretty obvious that this is an Islamic center. You have to take your shoes off to come into the office, right? So if a person comes in who has a girlfriend or a drinking problem or, is away from Islam, there's a reason. So if we shun them away immediately, if we sit there and just judge them like, dude, you're not supposed to be having a girlfriend, then you kind of just, shut all the doors. Then they're not going to talk. Then it's beyond,
you're cornering them and you're putting them in a defensive mode.
Yeah. So it's more of a client-centered environment. So whoever comes in, whatever problems, we don't judge. And if we have a reaction to it, that's usually something we do consultation, supervision. I have my own therapist, by the way. I see like maybe once a month or so. If I'm having a lot of negative reaction towards my clients, I'll go talk to my therapist. But, we ideally we're not supposed to judge them.
Now, a lot of our young listeners, they're a friend of somebody and who's going through a lot of difficult problems, and their friend will come to them and ask them for advice or some kind of help. What are some basic things they can do just to be a good listener and be a good friend and help them out of?
And without making matters worse, if I can add to that.
Exactly.
Because sometimes we try to counsel people and we can make matters worse if they have certain imbalances. So is there like a general layman's survival guide of counseling each other as human beings?
Yeah.
General principle. And you don't have to have, 10 bullet points right off the top of your head, but
I mean, the most basic element of therapy is empathy, right? Empathize. So, whenever somebody comes in, and one of the problems, especially men or boys have it, is that we try to fix things and we try to solve problems. And this doesn't work out in marriages, especially because our wives come to us and, they're telling us about their day or the problem they're having. We're like, why don't you try this? Why don't you do this? So the basic element of empathy is you sit and you listen. You just hear them out, whatever they got to say, don't judge. If they're coming to you, there's a reason, right? They're looking for somebody. They found you. They think you're capable of hearing them out without judgment. Just do that, just sit and listen to them. And that in itself, that's like 90% of therapy, honestly.
I agree with you 100%, man. There was an uncle that came to me about his son, and he was just talking to me, and I didn't say one word. I think I told you guys this before too. I didn't say anything. I was just listening to him. And after talking to me for about 40 minutes, he finished. He's like, thank you. It made me feel so much better. And I really didn't say anything. You're just like, okay, kind of like those, just, small reactions like that. Yeah. And it is, empathy and just listening is a very strong tool.
And this is Sunnah Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Yes.
I mean, we know the story of the woman who was leaving the city and, the Prophet Sallallahu was helping her out. And he's just hearing her. I mean, she's talking bad about him. He could have easily defended himself, like, you're talking about me. I'm not saying all this, But he just heard her, just didn't say anything.
Yeah.
He didn't even mention his own name, at the end when she found out. So it's really powerful tool just to listen to somebody and not just listen like, oh God, hear this guy, here he goes again. But to like sit there and like have some compassion, like, okay, I want to hear you out. And that's why therapy is actually really tough. Like we don't see 8 clients a day. Like if we have an 8-hour work day, it's usually like 4 or 5 maybe tops, because it's hard sitting there and trying to listen and empathize with somebody for an hour or 50 minutes, and then try to do that again with another person, and time after time. And then you have sometimes couples, one has its own problems, its own perspective, and the other one has her own, and then you have to empathize with both of them, so it's challenging.
You said a key word, and it's called empathize. A lot of people end up doing a lot of sympathizing and not empathizing.
So basically, if you can walk in their shoes, and if you can let them know that you understand what they're going through without saying things like, I know exactly how you feel, right? That's not empathy, because you don't know how they're feeling, right? It doesn't matter if you could be in the same situation, but like, I could understand, man, that's tough. Like, wow, that's difficult. Well, so what did you do, right? Oh, wow, like, how did you work that out? Or, just kind of like being there with them as they're trying to explain their problem. That's empathy.
Exactly.
Earlier you said something about you once a month you go see a therapist.
Yeah.
That's really interesting, actually. I've never, you don't really hear much about like an actual psychologist actually going to see another psychologist. Why?
So just as you go see a doctor every year for a physical checkup, in case something goes wrong, like if there's something happening deep down inside in your blood, or, you got some infection going and you don't know about it, and the doctor's going to do a blood test or, do a physical and find out. That's what I do. Therapy is supposed to be for that purpose. So there's a lot of people out there who just go see a therapist that don't have any problems. Alhamdulillah, I don't have any problems. I don't have any like significant issues going on with my personal life, career, marriage, nothing like that. Alhamdulillah. Beyond the basic issues that everybody has. But I think when I go talk to the therapist, that the therapist is helping me recognize some of the potential issues that may come up. Because now you're talking to a person who's empathizing with you from their perspective, and who's able to see some of those, some of those issues that may come up. So you're protecting. It's more of prevention rather than like intervention.
How does Islam play in all this? Have you learned anything from, have you applied Islamic principles to your psychology?
As far as the principles are concerned, I think what I do is I help people sometimes protect their faith, their iman. So I'll give you examples, right? A woman came to me. She was severely suicidal, wanted to kill herself. Killing yourself is a sin, right? And so, by helping her through that, it kind of like uplifted her iman, and so she didn't kill herself. So I kind of helped her save herself. That was kind of like the way I looked at it, right? Couples. So I had one husband who was ready to cheat on his wife because he had so many problems, right? He was actively seeking out prostitutes from Craigslist, trying to find somebody so he can, have an affair. So that's another sin, so like through therapy, through that marital counseling, he alhamdulillah didn't do that. They still had significant issues, but that wasn't on his mind. I have I have actually 3 of the different clients who have similar issues, but this one kid who's a Hafiz of Qur'an, but he actually had become an atheist. And so it's been almost over a year now, and over time I've kind of guided him back. So now he's able to pray maybe once a day, and read some Qur'an, but at least he's not an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
So do people come to you specifically for religious counseling? Like they know they're coming in for religious-based or inspired counseling, so you would work with that accordingly. And then you have other people that are just coming for a general,
So as I said earlier, it's client-centered. So
Okay.
we don't like if the client comes in and says, I have this problem. Like I had one client who drives from very far away, and he had problem with pornography, and it was a specific religious issue because he's like, I know it's haram and I feel bad and I'm sinning and I'm praying, so help me, right? So he came with that kind of like agenda. So whatever the person brings, we go with that, right? And so we do assess for religiosity. We do bring it up. And then if the person's not comfortable, we won't, push it, right?
What are some of the biggest, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No.
What are some of the biggest issues you deal with?
It's hard to say what's big. There's like different areas. So individual.
Well, he
counseling-
mentioned something about suicidal. I don't think any
it's
worse than
huge.
that, right?
Depends, right? It's all like, it's subjective, right? So, I had a bigger reaction to there's 3 kids that I saw. One of them I don't see anymore, but 2 of them I'm seeing right now. They both went to madrasa and they're having severe like psychological, social issues because of that. And having been gone to a madrasa and being a hafiz myself, that part like hit me the most. It hit me the hardest. And so that for me is the bigger problem, that these kids, there's a kid who's supposed to be a hafiz, is an atheist. Like, it completely doesn't, mind boggling for me.
So as a therapist, are you in the case where the kid wants to become an atheist or he has become an atheist, are you pulling refutations? Are you trying to refute him, or are you actually trying to treat the underlying cause which has caused him to go down that road?
So I can tell you a little bit about him. He's in high school, and the reason he went and became an atheist wasn't because he like sat down and researched and he was like, I figured it out, and Islam, or there's no such thing as religion. He actually had a lot of anger and resentment towards his parents for putting him through hifz. And so when he went through that, he had a lot of anger, right? And so that anger was either going to be directed towards his parents, or towards that which they were pushing him towards, like the Qur'an in this case, or Islam. And so, so he wasn't going to hate his parents and like not talk to them or leave. And he's too young to do that anyway, because they take care of him. So he chose the other, which was, anger towards Islam and Qur'an.
For people seeing a therapist or a psychologist, is this still looked down upon, or is that changing?
There's still a lot of stigma. I mean, we still have clients. I had one client tell me, this was during Ramadan, so he's like, can you see me like when nobody's there? So we had a session like after Tarawih at like 12 o'clock, because he was like afraid that somebody's going to see him. So we get people, there's still stigma out there. It is changing, but I feel like I wish there was, more that could be done. This is why I'm not hesitant in sharing that I have a therapist. In fact, I want other people, even if you're completely fine and have no problems, to just go find somebody. I mean, you can get therapists for, really cheap. If you have insurance, there's no problem. So
yeah, Sheikh Amr always is telling everyone to get a therapist.
Yeah, and I tell people too. There's many times I just seek out a therapist, and just to encourage people. Because when you're on the mimbar or you're giving people a dars, you have to cure their hearts also. And physically. But I want to switch gears a little bit, because there's this amazing person that you mentioned, Balkhi, which actually intrigues me. And I know he intrigues you. And you're the one who introduced him to me a few years ago, and how that kind of inspired you to take that path of a type of spiritual healing, infused in your therapy. Can you just tell us a little bit about him and how you were inspired by him, how you found him, and what benefits, because he is a scholar of Islam, right? And if you could just shed some light on that.
Sure. So this kind of ties into the other question you asked me about earlier too, about having problems in your life. So when I was in grad school, finishing my doctorate, towards like the second half of it, my plan was to become a health psychologist, because that's like, I had a master's in biomedical sciences. I was pre-med before, so it just kind of made sense, right? They combined the two of like together, and I was like, okay, I'll go with it. So I was doing an externship, and in that externship, I got terminated, right? And whatever the reasons were, I had some issues of my own, and the supervisor didn't like me. In any case, so I got terminated, and I was almost at the verge of getting kicked out of my program. That's how bad it was. And so that was a real difficult time for my life. I mean, I thought like the world was going to end, because here I work towards the degree. I'm towards the end. I really want to do it, and I'm good at it too. And, I'm not going to be able to complete it. And, so at that moment, and just like all of us, when we have problems, we pray more, and we do more dhikr, and we do more Qur'an. So I started doing that. And when I was doing that, not only did I find myself attaching a lot to the deen and the Qur'an and hadith, but also to other elements. Like then I was looking into Islamic psychology. I was looking into, I started reading Allama Iqbal a little bit more. A lot of his poetry.
One of your passions, Allama Iqbal. Awesome poet.
Who is that?
Definitely. So Iqbal is a poet from the Indian subcontinent. Right? He was born there. He traveled to other areas. Like he got his doctorate from, I believe, Germany. He lived in England for a while, and he went back. He's a poet and a philosopher, and so he's written a lot of poetry. So I started reading that, and that really, pulled me out of that. And when I got pulled out of my problems, and alhamdulillah, everything got resolved. That's when I said, you know what, this is what I really want to do. So I started reading more, Razi and Ghazali and Balkhi. Balkhi was introduced to me actually by Human, and he had written about it. And so there's a small translation, a small book by Malik Badri, and the book is called Sustenance of the Soul. It's on Amazon, and that's a translation of some of Balkhi's work. Then there's other stuff that's going on now. Like, for example, recently one of our staff members from California released an article on Balkhi, where Balkhi talked about obsessive compulsive disorder. In 9th century, he had identified this as a disorder and had the symptoms listed out, and they're the same exact symptoms that you find now in literature. And the credit that's taken usually by like 17th, 18th century Western scholars, he had figured that out like ages ago. And so it's really amazing to have someone like that in our culture, our history. And so it's like, it makes me really proud. So that's where I kind of got inspired. And then I saw that a lot of people were doing this work. So I met up with Human, and I'm like, like what he was doing at Khalil Center, it was really small at the time. Like I want to join and, do this. And so he's been helping to educate me, and we're kind of just doing this together.
Very nice.
There's this trend towards mindfulness. Have you heard about this?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I have my own opinion about it, but I want to hear your thing about it.
Wait, what's your opinion? I want to know.
I don't know. I think it's really cool, actually. I listened to a few things by John Kabat-Zinn, who's an MD, who's a psychologist or whatever he is, and so he has this thing where it's just basically you kind of just sit and it's just quiet, and you try to focus. It's different. I mean, he has a whole CD set and everything, but you kind of just focus on like one thing. For example, you focus on breathing, or you focus on a certain part of your fingers or your hands or something like that, right? And I would do it. I would actually try and do it maybe 2-3 times a week. And I noticed, like, whenever I do it, like I'm so much clearer. Like everything is a lot more sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I find really interesting is actually I find Salah to be almost the same thing. Like where it's just kind of, when you're praying on your own, it's just kind of, it's like really quiet. It's kind of serene, right? Because when you walk around, I mean, you're hit by so much information. I mean, you open up your computer, I mean, just bam, you go to Reddit. I mean, there's a million different things you're learning every day. But I also find that it's very interesting. It's like a retreat almost. You kind of just quiet. Kind of just shut out the world.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, and
it's essentially kind of like meditation is, right? It's a
meditation is exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. What is your opinion of this?
So, I mean, mindfulness is definitely very helpful, because what ends up happening is we become really automatic, like robotic, and we don't notice even some of the things around us. So, for example, anger is one of those issues that happens because we don't notice ourselves and our emotions. So something's happening and we're getting anxious, and now we're getting a little bit more mad, and now we're getting angry, and we're not noticing all this. So people just say, oh, he just blew up. I didn't realize, like, I go from like 1 to a 10 without even realizing, that I'm that angry. And so we work with them to be more mindful. So it's being here and now in the moment, recognizing your surroundings, being aware of yourself. For example, he said breathing, but it's just the act of being mindful, basically, just as the term suggests. But yeah, it definitely is very helpful. It's a core component of some of the cognitive therapies out there, and we teach our clients that.
No, go ahead.
Isn't that wouldn't the Prophet also do that whenever he'd whenever he'd retreat to the mountains? He kind of just be alone and kind of just be by himself.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing is that's how he initially got prophethood. Right, and one of my favorite things to discuss as far as seerah is concerned is where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he before his prophethood was searching for his creator, right? Which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Surah Duha, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى, right? And what that actually means is your creator, he found you. Dal, and dal over here is a linguistic meaning, because dal originally means to be astray, but over here it means that you're kind of lost and you're looking for a proper path, right? Fahada, and Allah guided you, right? So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew, and Abu Bakr and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by the way, were the only ones that never committed shirk pre-Islam and never drank alcohol pre-Islam, right? And them two were protected very well by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's prophethood. But he knew what was what he was around, and shirk and the idols and whatever injustice that was happening. He knew that there was something very wrong with this picture, and he knew there was Allah, but he was looking for a path to be guided, right? So this quietness that he would be in the cave would actually help him concentrate and ponder upon the creation that Allah had provided as evidence for us to lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And that's what Surah Al-Duha is. So for our listeners, if you get an opportunity to read about Surah Al-Duha and Alam Nashrah, it's basically the communication between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the journey that he actually went through to find Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a phenomenal journey, right? And how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him guidance? He gave him prophethood, right? So that's something really amazing.
Didn't a great scholar like Al-Ghazali do the same thing? He went to meditate for a long time.
Well, Ghazali accomplished so many things, but when you were mentioning, documenting positive things that you did throughout the day and what you can do better in the future, there's a concept, that the scholars have developed based on evidences in the Qur'an and Sunnah, which is, muraqabah, which is doing all the, thinking about all the things that you've done throughout the day, and muhasabah, same exact thing, taking into account of yourself and trying to change those things, right? Because there's many
the
things.
negatives or the positives?
Negatives, and you look at positives too, right? But as far as negatives are concerned, for instance, and you could definitely shed light on this also. But there's many things that we do throughout the day, and when you wind down, there's either things that are very prominent where you're like, man, I was way out of line when I did that. That happens to all of us, especially
all of us,
right? Especially when you're tossing and turning at night. Well, that's a sign that's given to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's no such thing as a coincidence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives that to us again so we can solve that problem, right? And it happens to be at nighttime where everything's peaceful, right? So we have to deal with that. Once we deal with that, we say, you know what, I can't do that anymore, or I have to go apologize to that person. That's number one step towards progress, right? So you've dealt with that. And that's kind of if you really think about it, I don't know about you guys, but when I deal with things or I'm tossing and turning at night, when I tell myself, okay, I'm going to deal with it, and then I get a better sleep. And if it's 3 things I have to deal with, I'm like, oh, I did this. Oh man, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, maybe the way I asked this person that, it could have came off really rude. I have to talk to that person tomorrow, and and then we actually walk ourselves through a scenario how we're going to do it. That's a certain type of muhasabah, right? A certain type of accountability that we have on ourselves. But once we tell ourselves and we give ourselves a solution how we're going to deal with it, then we get a good sleep, right? Then you can actually, turn to your side and go to sleep. Yeah. So, but we have to do that with everything, Actually, what? I did that. Oh, Moga, me and him, we did this together. Oh, we shouldn't have done that, And that's you recognizing, and you have to rectify, right?
One thing I notice with myself whenever I'm playing any sport or something, right? So basketball, sometimes I'll just snap, and I'll yell, and then
0 to 100 thing.
Yeah, 0 to 100. It's like the craziest thing, because normally, I'm pretty calm. I mean, I usually don't yell at people. It's just completely out of my nature. And then I'll do it, and I'm like, wait, why? Why would I do it? Like, just instantly regret it. Like, yo, my bad, dude. I didn't mean to do it. I don't know. I think it's so cool.
That happens a lot in sports, and I see that in me and many other people I've played the sports with. Why do we go from 0 to 100 like that? And that's
so. I mean, like I said before, not being aware. Anger is a secondary emotion. So usually underneath anger, there's something else going on. Usually, and so one of the main issues, especially with men, that happens with anger is depression. And so I don't know whether you guys are depressed or not. Oh, man. But I can tell you that the people that I've assessed who've had anger have had depression a lot. Very common. So the reason that is the case is because when women get depressed, they'll cry, they'll share their problems. They'll even look sad, so you can tell they're able to express it, right? But when we get sad and depressed, we just hold it down. We don't show it. We just shut down. You can't tell that we're sad or depressed. And then we bottle all that, the anxiety, the emotions in there, and then it comes off as anger. And so,
is that the same for sports too? Like, for instance, sports is very competitive, right? And you realize, but the beautiful thing about this is that you have to fix some principles if you're lashing out. And I'm not just talking about you. It happens to everybody. But during sports, during that competition, that's where I think the clock starts ticking for how patient you really are, right? But yeah, I was always very interested in that.
Well, I always see the most extreme version of someone when they're playing sports. For example, all of our personalities are magnified 1,000%. To see someone's patience, you'll see that very clearly. It's very noticeable. Their irritability, their their demeanor and how they carry themselves, everything's very noticeable on the basketball court or on a football field. That's what I saw, at least when I play sports. I'm usually able to see someone's character very quickly and how they carry themselves in their life.
Interesting.
Dr. Fahad, it's hard to talk about depression without talking about drugs. Do you prescribe?
No, I don't. No, in Illinois, psychologists can, but I'm not going to not planning on going that route.
So, you can.
I can. I mean, I have to go back and get some like classes in.
Okay.
Which I could easily because I have a master's in science, but I'm not planning on.
So the therapy you do is just purely through conversation,
Yes.
and is that as effective?
So there's a lot of research behind it. The easiest way to explain this is if somebody has a problem, let's say like somebody lost their job, right, and they're going to be depressed. So the depression will cause, some symptoms to emerge. Or let's say there was a childhood issue, they got abused and now they're depressed. And then so they're having some symptoms, they can't get out of bed, they can't go to sleep. They're not eating as much, they have low energy. So the drugs will take care of the symptoms, right? The drugs will give them more energy, being able to get out of bed in the morning, maybe, increase their appetite, whatever. But unless they deal with the underlying cause, the medication will stop working eventually. So most research out there suggests that therapy itself or therapy in conjunction with the drugs, when I say drugs, I mean medications, is the best route for treatment.
Oh, okay.
And you're very well versed in the study of cognitive behavior therapy. You specialize in cognitive behavior therapy, and just for our listeners, can you just summarize what you do in cognitive behavior therapy and why you feel that it's a very awesome treatment?
There could be multiple reasons. I mean, I went to a school which is primarily cognitive behavioral therapy oriented, so maybe that's why I'm that way. So CBT, basically the two terms, as it suggests, cognitions and behavior. It talks about like thoughts that people have, where those thoughts emerge from, what are the underlying schemas that people have as they grow up and they develop, and then how do those thoughts affect the person's behavior. So for example, if a person has a low self-esteem and he's always having thoughts like I suck in life, I can never get things done, then he's never going to take any chances and do anything in his life because it's holding him back. So that's one example. And so, or if a thought is like, my parents hate me or don't love me, then, he's never going to, even if he sees that love, he's never going to be able to reciprocate or actually even accept that. So that's just an example, but that's what it deals with primarily. And so we talk about thoughts related to the self, others, and the world, thoughts about the future, and then how that's affecting the behavior. And we try to work with them. So making them aware of their thoughts. So that goes back to the whole mindfulness and awareness. Mm-hmm. That's the first step. So that we want the person to become aware of what they're thinking, and then be able to catch themselves. So then after a while, they don't need therapy. So to give you an example, like for example, let's say a person is sitting in his office and then his boss calls him and says, come to my office, I need to talk to you, right? Now, if the thought goes through the mind, the immediate thought is, oh my God, I'm going to get fired. Well, what's the evidence to that thought? Like, have you been fired before like this? If the answer is no, well, what are the chances? Have you done anything wrong? Well, no, then why are you having that thought, right? So being able to evaluate that, right? Okay, I have this thought, but you know what? There's no reason for me to think this way, so it's probably something else, right? And be able to calm yourself down. So that's where we want our clients to be eventually. But initial stage is being able to recognize the thoughts, what the thoughts are, if there's a theme, a pattern, and how those thoughts are affecting the behavior.
Mm-hmm. And is it safe to say that CBT is basically you are the one that makes your mood, right? You are the one. If you have a bad mood, if you're kind of in a slump or if you're depressed, it's thoughts that you allowed to be formed, and you're basing your reality off of those thoughts, right? And I just want to give an example. Like if you're in a worried state or if you're in a depressed state, everything around you seems gloomy, right? Exactly. Naturally, even though it can be very bright. Exactly. Right. And if you're very happy and if you're very optimistic, and you were saying being very positive, because if you're positive about everything, it's very hard for negativity to come in. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you're very positive, optimistic about things and giving people excuses of what we're supposed to be doing in the Sharia, everything is happy and you can appreciate little things, right? Even though others may not be appreciating it. Right. So is it safe to say that cognitive behavior therapy is helping people recognize those things, making them, let them know it's actually not as drastic as you think it is?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's all about how we take things into perspective. One example that came to my mind when you were talking was, I teach developmental psychology, so we were talking about kids getting beaten up, right? And I grew up in Pakistan from up until 10 years old, 5th grade. I got my fair share of the beating from school. And, I wasn't traumatized by it. I'm not like negatively affected by it. I don't have any, but that same amount of beating, if somebody here got it,
yes,
he would be more sensitive because again, the environment, the way you perceive it. And so that's like one example, right? Like here, because there's a sensitivity to the topic, it's not allowed. Kids are more sensitive to that. In Pakistan, yes, it's true. Their kids are still sensitive and you shouldn't beat them. So I'm not saying that it's okay to beat your child, but it's just a different environment and people get out of there and they're perfectly fine. Like, like not a big deal. Everybody got beaten up and so did I,
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Just a norm.
Environment plays a huge role. Yeah.
How does what kind of therapy do you use to work with addictions? I think a lot of Muslims, at least on like Reddit and whatnot, from what I see, are struggling with like sexual addictions. What kind of therapy do you use for that?
So it depends on why they're doing it, right? Addictions could be because, like, say for example, you grew up in an environment and you peer pressure and you got into it, or you got too exposed to, say, like pornography and you just kind of became addicted to it. So you have to identify what the reason is. Sometimes it might be anxiety problem. Somebody has a lot of anxiety and they need to relieve their anxiety and they get addicted to a certain, substance or behavior addictions. Sometimes people might have like OCD and that's like, causing that to kind of, it's coming out as some sort of like an addiction. And so identifying what it is, then we can kind of treat it. Right. So just addiction on itself, it's treatable, but it depends. If you go to like a addiction counselor, they'll do their like 12 steps and identify the triggers and do this and that. There's a whole programs out there. As a psychologist, I try to look at what the underlying cause is. For example, I have one client now who never in his life was ever like addicted to pornography. I think he watched it like maybe, a couple of times when he was young. And then now in his marriage, he's addicted. And so his big issue was because he felt that he wasn't being fulfilled by his wife. And, so that was the reason why he went into that and became addicted. So identifying that really helps. Yeah. And sometimes people have an addictive personality too. So some people just get addicted to different things. So if it's not pornography, it'll be drugs. If it's not drugs, it'll be watching TV. If it's not TV, it's playing video games. With their phone, whatever it is, they'll just get easily addicted.
So now you identified something very important, that getting to the root cause, right? Now, a lot of people, especially in our community, they're not very comfortable coming to a therapist or psychologist for these kind of things. What are the first steps they can take in order to get to the bottom of this? At least if they absolutely will not go to a therapist, there's no convincing them.
You're talking about people who are addicted, or those who are seeing
people who are addicted. Yeah,
I think either whether they're addicted or they need counseling, or how do they even start cure if they have to by themselves?
I mean, the first thing you have to recognize is that you have a weakness, a problem, right? And if you don't recognize a problem, then you can't really work towards a solution. So if they realize that, look, I have a problem, and I've tried these things and I haven't been able to overcome this problem, then I need to get help, right? I mean, that's the most logical thing that everybody has, right? Like, let's say you have back pain, you take Tylenol and it doesn't fix it. Now days go by, you're going to say, I got to go see my doctor because I have this pain that's not going away and I've tried different things, so if a person's not able to get through that process, sometimes we have people like the parents will bring their child in, or some family members will coerce somebody else to come in. And these people don't want to be in therapy. They're like, I don't have a problem. They're either in denial or they don't want to change. There's a whole model. It's called the Prochaska and De Clemente were the two researchers. It's called a model of change, I believe. And it talks about different stages of change that you could be in. So you're in contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and there's something else. Pre-contemplation, I think, is the one before that. And so if you're not in the right state of mind, you're not going to get any help. You see what I'm saying? So I had this one kid, for example, come in, and his sisters and mom used to bring him in. And so first session, he's there, like he's not talking. Second session, he says, you know what? I don't want to be here. I'm just here because my parents brought me here. I said, okay, fine. Just sit there. You don't have to talk. Whenever you're ready, I'm here. And so the whole session, he was quiet. The third session, he just came. He took a nap. After 50 minutes, I woke him up and he left. And then he didn't come after. He didn't come after that. So that was the thing. I mean, like I told his mother, I'm like, I can't do anything. He doesn't want anything. He doesn't want change. He doesn't recognize he has a problem. Yeah. But if person recognizes it, I think this is time when you realize, you know what? I need to go to somebody. I need some help. And then find those who are trained.
Yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an very in a clear manner says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge or a specific field, if you don't know. So once you recognize that you have an issue, and that there's specialists available that take care of that, it becomes binding upon you as a Muslim, as your relationship with your Creator, because these things can go and go in the wrong direction very fast. That if you're having an issue, like if you're being sad, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah rahimahullah talked about being sad and talked about being sad for too long can be a sin upon yourself because you're not going and getting that help when people are readily available. Why? Because sad is one of those things that being sad has no benefit. All it does is convinces you and it takes you away from your Creator, right? And it makes you have negative thoughts towards your Creator. Mm-hmm. So sadness has no benefit. But we have to realize as believers, we're always going to be in a time where we're sad. That's why we talk to one of our friends. But if it is at any level, we should be very comfortable with our iman to go and talk to a therapist, right? It actually can be an act of ibadah. It can actually take you away from certain branches of atheism, right? And in certain levels. So for the listeners out there, we have to understand that stigma and that taboo has to be removed. And it's actually a way of getting closer to your Creator, of going to a therapist,
Definitely.
And maybe even better if you go to Fahad Khan. But that being said, there's something awesome that I was kind of working with, a model that I follow, and I just want you to verify it with me if you think that it's actually it has some legitimacy. Abdul Sadar Ahmad, right? Awesome guy, mashallah. A few years ago, he had a conversation with me about the word why.
Okay.
WHY. And ever since then, I was doing the research and I've been asking people about it. And there's some hadith that I would refer to also. But he told me that in counseling, the worst thing you could do is ask somebody why, right? Because you're challenging somebody, right? And when I started doing research about that, and obviously certain times why is actually, if you're asking your teacher, if you're ambitious about something, asking why is a good thing. But if somebody comes to you and said, I committed this or I did this and this, and you ask them why, when they're coming to you for help, you're actually challenging them, right? And the beautiful thing, and this led me to the path of Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh, where he would say that, where he said that my mother at a young age, at the age of 6, brought me to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam so I can be the servant of sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So he said, Anas bin Malik, he said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would ask me to do certain tasks and I would forget about those tasks. He would ask me to give something to somebody, and what would happen is that I would go and start playing with the kids because I was 6 years old, 7 years old, and I'd completely lose track of what he asked me to do. And he sallallahu alaihi wasallam would come looking for me, and he would find me. And one thing about sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would never say to me, "Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that?" He would always say, "It would be better if you did this. It would be better if you didn't do that." Right? And when I would reflect upon that story of Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh, I found that so amazing that even with a child, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, number one, he went looking for him. He's got prophethood to worry about. He's got the world to worry about. And he goes looking for this child who's playing with other kids. And the tarbiyah that he would do the one main thing that Anas bin Malik remembered is that he would never ask me, why did I do this? Or why didn't I do that? That's one of the main things he remembered about him. And he is the longest living Sahabi. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did dua for him to give him a long life. He lived to around the age of 120, which is why in some writings of Imam Hanifa, where he said that I met Anas bin Malik, at a very old age. So is it actually that true that asking the question why, and I try to refrain from it. But does it actually have that much of an impact in cognitive behavior therapy?
I mean, it depends on the rapport that you have established with the person. Usually, why is not the best question to ask. So there's two type of questions you can ask in therapy, generally open-ended and closed-ended questions.
This is
right?
what I'm talking about. Let's talk about it.
So the closed-ended questions are, like, what did you eat for lunch, right? Or, like, it's just like straightforward question where there's a yes/no answer, or there's like, usually one answer. The open-ended questions are like, when you're asking the how, or even the why sometimes. But the key is, if you ask somebody why, initially they're going to get very defensive naturally, right? They're going to start coming up with a reason to, like, why did I do this? Even though there may not be a reason, or maybe they're not aware of the reason. But after a while, I think, like, I've had some clients who have worked with for months now. Now I'm comfortable asking them that question, and I know they're not going to get defensive because we have that relationship. They know whatever they say, I'm not going to, like, judge them for it. Like, oh my God, you really did that because of that. So I think that's the key is, if you ask that question to somebody, let's say it's your kids, right? And they're doing something, you have to have that openness to, like, then be able to reciprocate, like, whatever they say, you don't, like, get, offended by it. And so because if you do, then the kid's going to start lying. So generally, yeah, you're right. It's absolutely, you should avoid that question as much as possible. But after a certain level of relationship has been formed, we do ask that question.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
For self-improvement, how should people go about doing that? I mean, how do you find the gaps in?
One of your passions, you said you love stripping away the self and trying to find out who you are.
Yeah, for myself, yeah.
Yeah. Is that possible for the average person to do, or?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
I haven't found my own self yet, so I don't really know.
Well, what? How do you deal with something?
Can you take us through that journey? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you deal with something you find that you don't like after you're stripping away layers of yourself, and you find out something you don't like about yourself, and you're really troubled by it.
And we're not asking you to get totally in your personal.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
But it's very intriguing to.
So I'm gonna talk about my other passion, Iqbal. Right, I'm gonna bring him in here.
Bring it in,
because I bring him in every conversation that I have usually. In one of his couplets, he talks about. He says, take a dive into your own self and figure out who you are. And he says, if you can't be honest with me, that's fine. At least be honest with your own self. Right, meaning recognize your own self, who you are, and be honest with that portion. So if you find out that there's a weakness that you have, at least you're recognizing that weakness, and now you can work on it. What we tend to do is we try to cover everything up and fool our own selves, thinking like, oh, I don't have this problem. Like I don't have an addiction. I can control my, my impulses. And then while doing so, we end up making mistakes and going in, setting ourselves up for some traps. Where Shaitan will come in and set a trap, and we're like, oh yeah, I can handle it, and go in, and then it turns out we can't handle it. So for me, personally, again, just a few days ago, there's a brother from YM. He came and he said, for his English class, he's like, I want to interview you. I'm like, all right, it's like completely random. And he's like, who is Fahad Khan? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, honestly, I'm still trying to figure out who this, I mean, yes, I'm a psychologist. I'm a husband. I'm a, son, a father, but I don't know who I am. Like, I have not figured out what I'm supposed to do, what I'm good at. I mean, I do clinical work. I started teaching. I like teaching. I do research. I like research. 10 years from now, I don't know what I'm going to be doing. What if I'm not even a psychologist? I don't know. Like, I haven't figured that out yet.
But if I can direct that question a little bit, when you say, I don't know who I am, and I think what you mean by that is you need to research yourself more. But what angle are you trying to tackle that from? Meaning, what is your role? What are you hardwired to do? What are you meant to do? Or what effect are you supposed to have in this life? Or do you mean, I don't really know myself because there's so many things I do and I don't know why I do it? Or, what I'm saying?
It's both. It's a little bit of both. It's recognizing who you are. Why do you do the things that you do? Why do you think a certain way? And then on top of that, what am I supposed to do in this world? Like, what's my duty here? What are we meant to do? We know what the bigger picture is here, right? But there's things that you do to get to there. Like, we know that we're supposed to eventually meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But like, why am I doing everything here? Like, what's the purpose of prayer, for example? Right? Just the other day I was thinking about this, and I shared this with a friend of mine. I was standing in prayer. And it's funny because I was thinking about this in prayer, so Allah forgive me for that. But I'm thinking like, okay, so in prayer, we're supposed to imagine or pretend that we're having a conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He created us all, everybody. And then, but while in prayer, we still have to be mindful of our surroundings. Like if somebody's trying to cross you, I think certain madhahib, you can even stop them from crossing you, right? If somebody taps you on your shoulder, you go back, to a different stuff. So you're not like completely away from the physical world, but you're still supposed to be away from the physical world. Like it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Then I realized, I'm like, you know what? Maybe this is the connection. Maybe salat is what connects the physical with the metaphysical, because you're constantly jumping back and forth. You're imagining Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're talking to him, and then a kid runs in front of you, like start trying to stop him, right? Or somebody taps you, you go back and start, or somebody starts crying or gets hurt. Or your mother calls you and praying nafil, and you're supposed to break and answer to her, So you're going back and forth.
Really? You're supposed to break?
In nafil prayer.
In nafil prayers. Not in farad.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I messed up.
So it's like the constant connection, right? You're going back and forth. And so I don't know why I'm talking about this. Oh yeah, so everything that we do, right? There's a purpose behind it. There's a bigger picture there. What is that? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, why are we doing all this? Like, why do we pray? Why do we have to give zakat? What's the purpose of fasting? We know the different, like it's sunnah, it's, ahkam. I completely accept that. I'm not questioning that part, but there's another purpose behind it, and I'm trying to figure that out.
That the answer to that changes over time, though, right? Because I remember, my younger self. I mean, complete idiot. But now that I'm older, my purpose or my goal in life, everything is constantly changing, and I mean. To me, it's for the better, I think. But that's also, I think, subjective, right? I mean, to everyone, it's a little different. I think that's actually a really cool question. I was listening to this podcast about not too long ago. It was a Rogan podcast, and he had this guest. His name was Dr. Amit Goswami. The guy himself is he's a quantum physics, right? That's what he does. One time he's talking, he said people have these certain feelings, like when you're depressed, or when you're sad, or when something happens to you. He's like, why does that feeling happen, right? Nowadays, all they do is, if you're depressed, they give you antidepressant, whatever. It just covers up, right? It just kind of covers the feeling, whatever, just so you can kind of go about doing what you're doing. He said something very interesting. He said, find out why you feel that way and change it. Do something about it, right? And I think that's one of the coolest things. I remember, like, before... there's certain, I'm young, whatever. So there's certain phases you go through where you don't pray. And then you're just like, dude, what am I doing? Like really, like, what is my purpose and everything? And you start feeling like, there's a certain emptiness. For example, let's say you take a test, whatever, and you fail, right? What do? You study for the next one, right? So you don't fail. So in that respect, I think when it comes to you as a person or just growing up, I think it's important to kind of stop, ask yourself why. Figure out what's going on in your life. I mean, hey, is it the people around you? Is your environment, whatever it is, and then change it. I think that's really important. But is that something you need to do with the help of a psychologist, or can you yourself fix that?
No, I mean, everyone's capable. So a psychologist doesn't come in and fix people like that. We help facilitate the process of change, right? So the person has the capacity to change. They just kind of don't know where to begin and how to move through that process, and we kind of just guide them through. So yeah, everybody has the ability to do that. Insan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created is the best of creation, and so we have the capacity to recognize like ourselves, our surroundings, why we're doing certain things, and then be able to change ourselves. But sometimes we get stuck in certain things. Like there's certain things that hold us back.
Sometimes you get comfortable. You get comfortable. Yeah. I mean, change is hard. Making a change is hard, especially like a big life change, especially if you're going to change, your friends or the people who hang out with. I mean, it's tough. That's something I totally see. Yeah, and sometimes we hold guilt holds us back, and so people come to us and, we talk about forgiveness, listen, you did something wrong, but there's such thing as forgiveness. I mean, I've committed so many sins in my life, and, I'm sure there's somebody's hearing me right now and I've hurt them. Please forgive me. Honestly, like being able to forgive yourself, being able to forgive others, you make mistakes, you have to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, and then you move on. But some people can't do that. And so somebody else can come and guide them sometimes.
A lot of us are in Indian, Pakistani background. We have a lot of a guilt culture within our, I guess maybe it's from parenting, or it could be from friends. I can't exactly pinpoint where it's coming from, but I can really sense it more in Indian Pakistani families than any other cultures, at least from my own experiences. How do you deal with people who come to you and saying, I'm always feeling guilty about something. I want to get beyond this.
So the E word, empathy, right?
Yeah.
It's like that will take care of a lot of the guilt and shame that people feel. Where does it come from? I mean, parenting, you're right, it does play a role. There's a whole model on psychosocial development, and one of the stages is initiative versus shame, autonomy versus shame, initiative versus guilt. And so ages 3, 4, kids go through that stage where if they don't become autonomous or learn to take initiative, they're going to form shame and guilt, right? And that has to do with parenting. So the parents don't let them do whatever they want, then they can never get that done in life because they're always feeling guilty or shameful about it. So empathy is one, being able to say, you know what, it's, I understand you're feeling this, like this feeling, but let's talk about where it's coming from, right? What's making you feel this way? Were you always this way? When did you first start feeling that way? So being able to recognize where it's coming from and then have them challenge those thoughts, right? So for example, if somebody feels guilty about getting married because they have a pornography addiction, right? So now it's like, okay, well, you've identified the problem, you're working towards it. What's the guilt? Is it guilt that you're not gonna you feel like you're gonna hide it from your wife? Well, maybe you could let her know. Maybe there's somebody out there who's not gonna be, who might be accepting of it. Is the guilt that you won't be able to you won't be able to be sincere with your wife because of the effects of pornography? And then let's work on that issue, right? So whatever issue it is, we can work on it and we can make some progress in it instead of just feeling guilty and holding ourselves back.
For subjects like that, for pornography, for drugs and everything, it's in the Islamic community, it's that's never talked about. It's never talked about. And if somebody does talk about it, it's like, oh man, what's he saying? Even right now, I mean, even the fact that you kind of bring it up, it's kind of like, it's like, ooh, it's taboo. What can we do that as a group, as Muslims? I mean, it's something that has to be talked about. I mean, you can't keep, brushing it under the carpet. I mean, it has to be talked about eventually.
Yeah. So it's a very common problem. I can tell you that. A very common problem. Almost everybody who's coming through my door, whether the problem was marital related, whether it was, anxiety for something else, social anxiety, one of the common associated problems was pornography addiction. And so what we have to do is, recognize it as a problem and then again, be able to go seek help. Like if you find, if a person, and I've seen some really, really bad cases where somebody was watching pornography for like 6 to 8 hours a day. Versus somebody who was just, maybe watching it for like, once every like 3 days or something, right? For like 5 minutes. But whatever the case, if it's that bad, you realize like, oh, this is a problem. Like I'm not able to function and I'm constantly, my whole day revolves around this. I need to go get some help. And also, for parents and other people to recognize that, look, we can't expect our children to live in this environment where everything is so sexualized, right? From like very early on. And then like, we expect so much from them. And so like in Desi culture, like parents won't, talk about marriage until like you're 30, 28, 30. I mean, I remember when I met my wife, I told my parents like I want to marry this girl. My dad's like, well, let's wait till you go to medical school. And I'm like, by the way, I'm not going to medical school. It's probably a good time to break that to you. But like that was the thing. And I was 24 at the time. But alhamdulillah, I got married when I was 26. The point is that we can't have that, like expect people living in this world where it's so readily available. Kids are getting exposed to it at age 7, 8 easily, in schools, even earlier. And then they're going to keep watching it. And, these Muslim kids can't have girlfriends and they can't have sex. And then, now they go off and they're supposed to go through and finish medical school in age 35. Now they're getting ready to get married. Of course they're going to get addicted. Like what do you really expect? Mm-hmm. Right. So this is something that we all have to recognize.
What would you tell parents to do?
So
it's one of those. It's really hard to talk about. I mean, I can't imagine my dad talking to me about that, or me talking. If I had a kid talking about, it's tough.
Yeah,
you guys are parents, man. I mean, not even that. I mean, I'm talking about just drugs in general.
When you say that, like, if you're talking about like a kid who already has a problem, or like how do you begin the conversation? Or
I mean, how do you address it as a community? I mean, it has to start somewhere, right?
I think we have to get our kids married early. Maybe I that's the only way. I'm trying to think of how I would handle it with my son.
All right, what about drugs then?
You got to take the drugs are a whole other ball game.
Yeah, but
right?
drugs are not. It's not really shameful to talk about. I mean, it's not because of the culture. It's not. There's not too much embarrassment about telling kids about drugs and telling them to be aware of drugs. When it comes to things of sexual orientation, it becomes a little more difficult. But there's many ways of talking to your children without, because the reason why is we're so used to anything that's sexually oriented is almost being borderline blasphemous.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that the way Islam sees sexual relations is actually a certain type of nobility because you're going through it in a certain way. So if it's taught in a noble way, taught in an honor type way, it kind of diffuses, I think, some of that embarrassment and the taboo aspect of it. And I'll give you an example, right? The way, and this is, my daughter was 5 years old at the time, and as far as marriage is concerned, because this is when the whole gay marriage thing came out, and so we have to teach our children that there's a halal way of getting married and a haram way of getting married, right? And if you can explain this to a 5-year-old, you can explain this to anybody, I think. So I was telling my daughter, I said, men dating women before marriage is not allowed in Islam, right? Boyfriend and girlfriend, that's not allowed. You have to be married in order to touch a woman and hug your woman and hug your wife or husband, right? She said, yeah. I said, a man marrying a woman is a halal marriage, right? And she was like, what do you mean halal marriage? I was like, that's the way it's supposed to be done. That's actually a type of ibadah. It's a type of worship. Or she said, yeah. And I said, do you know there's something called a haram marriage? And she said, really? I said, yeah. What if a man was to marry a man? That's haram. She said, man can marry a man? I said, people are starting to do that. And I said, a woman marrying a woman is haram. That's not a halal marriage. She said, oh my God, people do that too? I said, yeah. But in Islam, men are only allowed to marry women and women are only allowed to marry men. And that is what Allah wants. We have to keep Allah happy, right? So now they understand halal and haram. They don't associate it with, oh, it's disgusting or whatever the case may be. And, they don't even have to relate it to anything else. At a young age, if you teach them what is pleasing to Allah, that's what they're going to do. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes, that's what they're going to stay away from, right? And it takes all type of embarrassment out of it. You don't have to talk about details. But when they get older, there's certain ways to talk about details too, but you have to talk about it in a very noble way. And one thing you have to understand is kids, they see everything, whether it's, even if you don't have a TV and you have YouTube and you're seeing the commercials, they see people hugging and kissing. Like even Cars, the movie, which is the animated movie, what business does a car have kissing another car? Like, what is that trying to tell you? What business is it that a girl, she sees a guy in a cartoon? It's something we have to think about because we're taught behavior through projections, right? Why is it there even in an animated film that a girl, she sees a guy and she starts blushing right away and she starts talking about him with her friends? I mean, why is that even there? Like, what is being taught to them? It's taught to them how to behave around guys. Oh, this guy's cute. Oh, this girl's cute. And it kind of breaks the ice for them on how to do it.
It's a conditioning.
It's a conditioning. Thank you. That's a perfect word. It's a conditioning. It's teaching you how to act in that situation. So when you see a guy that's good looking or you see a girl that's good looking, then you know how to act. You're going to have a certain demeanor, composure, whether it's blushing or looking at them, or looking at them directly in the eye or winking at them, whatever the case may be. We're taught all of those things. So we have to race and let them know that, listen, this is very disliked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's lots of research out there on how to talk to your kids about sex and how to talk to your kids about the opposite gender. There's many awesome things on there online that you can find on YouTube. An Islamic way of talking to your kids about sex,
I think the key is having a conversation with the kids.
Yes.
And not shutting them down, whether it's drugs or whatever it is, and not reacting to it, right? When I was fifth grade, I first learned about, all this, and this was here in America, or sixth grade actually. And, I learned about the whole reproductive system, and I come home and we're sitting at dinner and my mom and dad are there, and I'm like, I learned this today, and, when the cells from the father come in, and my parents freaked out. My mom was like, you don't, like, what's wrong with you? You're sitting here talking about this with your parents. I never talked to them since then about that. So the point was that, I mean, they're more like desi, and I get it. I'm not blaming them. Alhamdulillah, it didn't cause any issues with me. But having a conversation with the kids, I feel like a relationship between father and a son and mother and daughter should be like very open and clear, just like friends. You can go talk about whatever and not expect like punishment or some kind of reaction. And oh my God, like if I said this to him, is he going to like punish me? You know?
And I think with parents, it's our choice. Either they're going to learn it from their environment in whatever way they want, or they're going to learn it from their parents, people that they love, right?
Exactly.
Today,
And you make the choice. We have to make the decision, right?
Exactly.
I saw this picture today. Is one of those like small cartoon, those little ads, and it was this dad. He's in a room and his little kid is on a computer, and the dad says, there's a bubble. It's like, son, we have to talk about sex. And the kid turns around. He says, "Sure. What do you want to know?" And then it's funny, but it's kind of like.
They're surrounded by it. They know everything. You just have to let them know how to be noble about it. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
One thing you did that was really cool is at the mosque where you were going through the that book on hadith, and you were talking about when Rasulullah was making wudu with Aisha.
Yes.
And you said some parents they said you shouldn't talk about it or something.
Yeah, no, it was about ghusl, right?
Yeah, ghusl.
They used to do ghusl out of the same vessel, Aisha radiallahu anha, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some people, when they talk about that, they actually, the reason why I said that was, I mentioned that hadith before, which is in Bukhari, where Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that when Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do ghusl, we would do ghusl together from the same vessel. Somebody got angry at me. He's like, "Why are you talking about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam doing ghusl with his wife? That's not something you should talk about." Right? And they're like, "What are these little kids here?" And just that thought of, I think what you were talking about is that false sense of shame that's not even supposed to be there, embarrassment that's not even supposed to be there, right? So it's kind of, and this is where cognitive behavior therapy, maybe you could help me out on this, but it's making a barrier that's not even existent, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wanted us to have this information because it's a healthy life. To take a ghusl with your wife if you need to, and to take a ghusl generally. There's so many benefits we can derive from that, but there's nothing to be ashamed about, especially if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wants us to know this information, right? But we build up these barriers and we consider it to be shame, but it's not the right type of shame. Yeah. Right? Do you understand what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm philosophizing or getting confusing, but we make our own barriers of what's right and wrong sometimes. Right? And it affects the way that we learn the deen. God forbid that becomes an obstacle for many people. Then they're not even going to want to talk about that in public. And anything that's in the Qur'an and in the hadith, we talk about it in a noble way. We talk about it in a very honorable way.
A lot of Muslims, I noticed their understanding of shame is more similar to Christianity's understanding of shame, where talking about sex itself is taboo. You're a perv. Every time that subject comes up, you can easily get that label, and you'll be walking around with it your whole life.
Yeah.
That's true.
The way you explained it was actually really cool. The way you told the hadith and everything, I thought it was really nice, and I think it is something that needs to be talked about. I think it's important, because I mean, if my dad ever tried to talk to me about that today, forget that.
You probably turn around. You probably the kid turning around the chair and be like, "What do you want to know?
What do you want to know? I got Sheikh Amr teaching me. What you want to know?"
I know we're kind of running out of time. Just a quick thing, because we would definitely want to have you again. I was researching something on dopamine resistance, right? And why it's actually very challenging, and how pornography addiction can be more addictive than some drugs because of the dopamine spike that individuals get from pornography actually molds them and kind of rewires them. And I was in Egypt and I was reading about this one article that was on Al Jazeera about the rewiring of the human brain through pornography. That's what the name of the title was, if any of you guys want to look that up, inshallah. But it was mentioning that the dopamine spike that occurs through pornography gets so high and so consistent that that dopamine spike will not occur when you are with a human being when it's supposed to occur, right? Because dopamine is the chemical or the in our brain that makes us happy or pleased, right, or satisfied. So the human being now, when he is with another human being and the body's not functioning the way it's supposed to be, and the only time the body is functioning is through pornography, is because it may be a theory, I don't know, maybe you could help me out, but the dopamine levels get so high at that time that nothing else satisfies it. So anytime somebody's even down they use that as an upper kind of, right? Because there's no other drug that's helping them. So there's actually a detox that's supposed to be done and a certain type of therapy, just like any drug that's supposed to be taking place, So I find that very interesting. I don't know if I'm wrong or if I'm exaggerating.
No. I mean,
anything.
with any addiction, whether it's chemical or behavioral, especially with chemicals or even medication. Let's talk about that for a second. There's two concepts that you have to remember. One is called dependence and one is tolerance, right? So if you keep using something, you're going to become dependent on it. So if it's pornography and you're getting that dopamine spike, now mind you, dopamine is that feel-good drug, right? That makes you feel like the pleasure, right? And if you go think of it psychologically, Freud, for example, talks about how sex is like the most basic component of pleasure, the source of human pleasure, right? So you're getting like the best form of pleasure that you can by watching pornography or close to it. And so you're going to start becoming dependent on it, right? Your body becomes dependent because now it's getting used to it. The other thing is called tolerance, which means your body will become tolerant towards it. So you need more of it to get the similar effect. And this is why people, like, nobody starts out watching pornography out of nowhere. Usually it starts out with something small, light, and it goes into like heavy. And then people talk about like the one client who comes from a far away, he's told me about how he's watched like some really weird stuff like that's out there, stuff where like, I don't even want to say it because who knows who's listening to this, but some really like nasty stuff that you couldn't even imagine. Why? Because he wasn't getting pleasure out of something that was like, normal sex. And so then it distorts the image in your mind of what sex is about. So when you're with your own, wife or husband, in your mind, this is how it's supposed to be. This is what you're expecting. This is what gives you pleasure. And what you get is the reality, which is sometimes not, different.
Exactly.
And that's why, people have difficulty sometimes.
That's awesome.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
It is awesome.
I don't know.
I want to wrap up this podcast. Sure. What do you want to leave us with? Is there anything you want to say?
I think one thing that was brought up was parenting. A few weeks ago, I made a Facebook post on like parenting, and I said, over 90% of the problems in society are due to poor parenting, and some people were offended by it, so I deleted it. But I just want to emphasize the importance of parenting. So for those who are parents,
how could someone be offended by that? I'm sorry.
Because they felt like some of the psychological problems out there are not like a person can be born with it, like developmental disorders. So like, how can a parent be responsible for that? I wasn't talking about that. That's why I said over 90%. But in any case,
yeah, you can't let those guys. They're always out there, ready to hate on you they're just waiting for the catchphrase. I'm sure they can find 10 different things we've said in this podcast where they can completely take it out of context.
Yeah.
And just try to hang someone.
Yeah, but I want to emphasize the importance of parenting. I mean, it's really essential for us to recognize, especially as parents, why do we do the things that we do, right? So there's a lot of good books on it. There's one book in my office, I forgot what it's called. It's called Parent-Child Relations, I believe. And it's by Muslim. It's a really awesome book. But there's a lot of good books. You can get parent training. You can come to a therapist for that as well. But becoming good parents is a key here. So I'll give you an example. Like I said, my recent passion has been working with these kids who went to madrasas. And the themes that emerged from working with these kids, I have these 3 kids that I'm working with. Man, like it goes down to parenting basically. Why do parents send their kids to become Hafiz? A lot of times they're like, oh, this is great. It's usually for their own reasons. Like, and these kids, they're saying things like, oh, my father manipulated me, or my parents were selfish. They did this for them and made me think I was doing it for myself. As just one example, but even drug use, even like pornography, all that, it comes down to how good of parenting that we can do. I feel like if we can solve the parenting issue, we would take care of a lot of bigger issues out there. Not everything, obviously, but at least most of it. So I would definitely say, like, in future, everybody, inshallah, is going to be a parent. Mm-hmm. And so, get some help and become better at it.
Awesome.
For those interested, how do they get in touch with you?
So you can go to khalilcenter.com. My every information's on there. KHALIL center.com. We have 3 offices in Illinois. We do web therapy. So if somebody can't come to the office, we can do online counseling within state, and out of state we do consultation. So we don't do like therapy for like high risk people, but
so people can reach you anonymously. on the
absolutely.
internet, and they can talk to you over Skype or
we have a HIPAA compliant video service that we purchased, and so it's confidential. Obviously, everything that happens is confidential, even if you're a child. So, like yesterday, I did an intake with a child, and the parent was there. So I told the parent, I said, "Look, legally, you have the right to all the information that's in here, whatever we talk about. But until you get a lawyer and try to get that from me, I'm not going to tell you." Like what we talk about in here, because that destroys the purpose of therapy. So everything is confidential. Everything that we talk about and remains between us. So I would say just try it. For those who are like, I think I need a therapist, just go in and have 2 or 3 sessions. It won't hurt you. And if you don't like it, you don't have to be there. But I always tell people, give it a shot. So khalilcenter.com. You can also contact me personally. My cell phone number is on the website. Email me, whatever works, inshallah.
That's all.
Great.
People contact you personally?
Yeah, I get texts all the time.
Really?
Yeah, my friends having that problem, or my friends having that problem. I'm trying to resolve this. So help me out. So yeah, all the time.
May Allah reward you for all your efforts, man. It's not easy and it's taxing. So may Allah make this the reason for you to enter Jannah.
Fahad, please come on as a guest again.
Inshallah.
There's so many other
week?
topics we wanted to talk to you
I
about.
want to talk about domestic violence.
Yeah.
I want to talk about protocols. There's lots to talk about.
Inshallah.
Yeah, we kind of hit up a whole lot of subjects in one podcast, but let's focus on something specific next time he comes on.
Yeah, ask the listeners, man. What do they want to hear from him?
For anyone interested in any subjects or topics, shoot us an email or a message. Inshallah, we'll have Fahad on.
Inshallah.
Awesome.
If he's interested. We can be reached at themadmamluks@gmail.com, themadmamluks@gmail.com. We also have a Twitter handle at the Mad Mamluks and a Facebook page. Like us, share.
Please like us.
Yeah, please like us. If you have any stories, send them out or questions or anything, please feel free to share it. I want to thank you, Dr. Fahad, for coming on.
Sorry.